You might think marriage is just about love, but in Japan it often comes with unspoken rules and roles. Traditional values still hold a lot of sway, and many marriages operate on gender norms that might surprise you. For example, the wife is often expected to manage the household entirely, while the husband focuses on work. Sounds straightforward, right? Not so much if you're used to shared responsibilities. Imagine coming home after a long day expecting to divide chores, only to find that your partner assumes you'll handle all the outside responsibilities while they manage the home. It's not necessarily bad, but it's different. This setup works for many couples in Japan, but for someone from a culture with more modern views on partnership, it can feel restrictive or outdated. Even in younger generations, these expectations can linger. Women in Japan are often raised with the idea that they should prioritize their role as wives and mothers. While this is changing, the pace of change isn't uniform. It varies by family, region, and upbringing, creating a mixed bag of expectations. Now let's talk about social events. In many Japanese households, hosting and entertaining guests falls squarely on the wife. From preparing elaborate meals to ensuring the home looks immaculate, it's a point of pride, but it can also be overwhelming. If you're not ready for this level of formality, it might lead to tension. Another curveball, the good wife, wise mother ideal, or Ryosai Kenbo. This old-school philosophy still pops up, implying that women should excel at both home management and child-rearing. For someone not accustomed to such pressures, it might feel like stepping into a role they never auditioned for. Of course, this isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. Plenty of Japanese women reject these norms, and some couples create modern egalitarian partnerships. But these are exceptions, not the rule. Understanding this cultural backdrop is key to navigating expectations. Traditional roles can also create hidden struggles for the husband. The weight of being the sole breadwinner isn't easy. Many Japanese men feel enormous pressure to succeed professionally, often sacrificing time with family. It's a dynamic that can leave both partners feeling isolated. Before entering a relationship with someone from a different culture, especially Japan, it's important to discuss these expectations openly. Miscommunication happens when assumptions replace conversations. No one's a mind reader after all. Finally, ask yourself, are you ready to adapt? Cultural differences aren't walls, they're bridges. But building that bridge takes effort from both sides. These traditional roles can feel limiting, but they're not insurmountable with mutual respect and understanding. Communication in Japan is like a dance, graceful, indirect, and often unspoken. If you're used to being straightforward, this can be both fascinating and frustrating. Japanese culture values harmony, so people tend to avoid confrontation at all costs. This means your partner might not always say what they mean directly. Instead, they expect you to pick up on subtle hints. It's like reading between the lines, but without a guidebook. For instance, if your Japanese partner says, "It might be better to do it this way," it's not just a suggestion. It could be their polite way of saying, "This is what I want." It's not deceitful. It's cultural. But if you're not familiar with this style, it can feel like you're constantly decoding messages. This indirectness extends to emotional expression too. Public displays of affection are rare, even in private settings. Don't expect grand declarations of love or dramatic outbursts during arguments. Love is shown in quieter ways, like making your favorite meal or remembering the smallest details about you. While this subtlety can be charming, it also means conflict resolution might look very different. In many Western cultures, airing grievances openly is seen as healthy. In Japan, however, confrontation can feel aggressive or even disrespectful. This can lead to unresolved tensions simmering under the surface. Humor, too, has its nuances. Sarcasm, for example, isn't as widely used or understood. A sarcastic joke might land flat or even come across as rude. Instead, Japanese humor often leans on wordplay or situational comedy, which might take time to fully appreciate. Over time, these differences can create a gap if not addressed. You might feel your partner is withholding their feelings, while they might think you're too blunt or demanding. Without open discussions, small misunderstandings can snowball into bigger issues. But don't despair. Every challenge is also an opportunity. Learning to adapt to your partner's communication style can deepen your bond. Start by asking questions and listening attentively. Sometimes simply showing curiosity about their perspective can bridge the gap. It's also worth noting that not all Japanese people strictly adhere to these norms. Many younger individuals, especially those exposed to international cultures, adopt more direct ways of communicating. But even then, old habits die hard, so a mix of styles is common. The key takeaway: be patient. Building a shared language of love and understanding takes time, especially when cultural norms are so different. But when you do, you'll discover that actions can speak just as loudly as words, sometimes even louder. Work-life balance? In Japan, it's more like work-life imbalance. The country is famous or infamous for its demanding work culture known as karoshi, or death by overwork. This isn't just a catchy phrase, it reflects the intense pressure Japanese workers face. If your partner is part of this system, it will inevitably affect your relationship. Imagine this: your spouse leaves home at 7 a.m. and doesn't return until 10 p.m. or later. Weekends, often spent at company events or catching up on tasks. It's not uncommon for Japanese employees to feel obligated to put in long hours, even if they're not productive. Why? To show loyalty to their company. For someone from a culture that values personal time, this can feel overwhelming. It doesn't stop at office hours. The expectation to attend after-work socializing, called nomikai, can further eat into family time. These drinking sessions are seen as essential for bonding with colleagues, but they can leave little room for connecting with loved ones. Resentment can build if you're left waiting at home night after night. Now, let's talk about holidays, or the lack thereof. Japanese workers typically take very few vacation days, even when they're entitled to them. Taking time off is often seen as selfish or disruptive to co-workers. So, if you're dreaming of frequent couple getaways, think again. You might end up taking solo trips more often than you'd like. This relentless work ethic also spills into household dynamics. If your partner is constantly working, you may find yourself handling most of the home responsibilities. It's not necessarily their choice, it's the system they're part of, but understanding that doesn't always make it easier to cope. Here's another layer. Many Japanese people internalize their work stress rather than sharing it. Your partner might come home exhausted and distant, leaving you feeling disconnected. This isn't a sign of disinterest. It's often a coping mechanism, but without communication, it can feel like an emotional wall. On the flip side, there are benefits to this work culture. It fosters incredible discipline and a sense of responsibility. Japanese workers take pride in their jobs, which can translate into a strong work ethic in other areas of life, including relationships. But this comes at a cost. So what can you do? Start by discussing boundaries and expectations early on. Encourage your partner to prioritize self-care and family time when possible. Even small gestures like scheduling regular date nights can make a big difference in maintaining your connection. Remember, work culture varies by industry and individual. Some professions in Japan are more flexible than others. Younger generations are also beginning to push back against the grind, seeking healthier work-life balances. So there's hope for change. In the end, adapting to Japan's work culture requires patience and compromise. It's a challenge, but with mutual effort, you can create a partnership that works, despite the long hours and late nights. Marriage in Japan doesn't just involve two people. It often feels like marrying into a community. Family and societal expectations can weigh heavily on a relationship, and navigating these pressures requires careful thought and open communication. If you're not prepared, it can feel like an unspoken third party in your marriage. Let's start with family. Japanese culture places a high value on filial piety, meaning respect and duty toward one's parents. It's common for couples to consult their families on major life decisions, from career moves to how many children to have. While this can foster strong family bonds, it might feel like interference if you're used to more independence. For example, some parents might expect their daughter-in-law to take on traditional roles, such as caring for elderly in-laws or managing family events. This can be particularly challenging if your own cultural background doesn't emphasize these responsibilities. Balancing these expectations with your own needs can be tricky. Societal pressures are another layer. In Japan, there's a cultural emphasis on maintaining appearances and avoiding actions that could bring shame to the family. This means decisions about your personal life, like whether or not to have kids, can become public topics. The pressure to conform can be overwhelming. Then there's the concept of giri, or obligation. This can manifest in various ways, such as attending endless social events or giving gifts during certain seasons. While these traditions are meaningful, they can feel burdensome if you're not familiar with their significance or purpose. Raising children in this environment can also come with its own challenges. Education is highly competitive in Japan, and parents are often expected to play an active role in their child's academic success. If you're not on board with this level of involvement, it can create friction in the relationship. But it's not all doom and gloom. Many families in Japan are warm, welcoming, and eager to learn about your culture. Over time, these relationships can grow into a beautiful blend of traditions. The key is setting boundaries early on and finding common ground where possible. For those who feel the weight of societal expectations, it's important to remember that norms are changing. Younger generations are redefining what it means to be married in Japan, with many couples pushing back against traditional roles and expectations. The best approach? Approach these pressures with patience and curiosity. Ask your partner about their family's expectations and share your own perspectives. This dialogue can foster understanding and help you both navigate the complexities of merging cultures. Ultimately, adapting to familial and societal pressures in Japan requires compromise, respect, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. It's not always easy, but with the right mindset, it can also be deeply rewarding. Moving to Japan or marrying into Japanese culture isn't just a relationship adjustment, it's a lifestyle overhaul. From the food you eat to how you greet your neighbors, every detail carries its own set of customs and expectations. If you're not prepared, it can feel like stepping into an entirely new world. Let's start with the obvious, the language barrier. While many Japanese people understand basic English, daily life often requires at least some knowledge of Japanese. Whether it's navigating contracts, handling utility bills, or simply chatting with your in-laws, not speaking the language can be isolating. Imagine being at a family dinner where everyone's laughing at a joke you didn't catch. It can feel like you're on the outside looking in. Then there's the food. Japanese cuisine is delicious, but it might take some getting used to if you're coming from a culture that leans on spices, dairy, or heavy flavors. From raw fish to fermented beans, natto, the local palate is an adventure in itself. It's not just about taste, it's about embracing a new way of thinking about meals. Housing is another adjustment. Japanese homes are often smaller and more minimalist than their Western counterparts. Futons, sliding doors, and compact kitchens might be the norm. And don't forget about shoes. Wearing them indoors is a big no-no. While these quirks are charming, they can feel restrictive at first. Cultural etiquette adds another layer. There's a right way to give a gift, a proper way to bow, and even specific rules for using chopsticks. Breaking these unspoken rules can feel embarrassing, especially in front of family or friends. But here's the silver lining. Japanese people are usually forgiving of foreigners who make mistakes as long as the effort is there. Social expectations can also be daunting. For example, silence is often preferred over small talk in public settings. This can be refreshing for introverts, but unsettling for those who thrive on casual conversation. Adjusting to this quieter, more reserved environment takes time. Community engagement is yet another aspect. In Japan, being part of a neighborhood involves participating in local traditions and events. Whether it's a seasonal festival or a neighborhood cleanup day, there's often an expectation to contribute. It's a wonderful way to connect with locals, but can feel like an added responsibility. And let's not forget about the seasons. Japan's weather ranges from scorching summers to freezing winters, with homes often lacking central heating or cooling. Adjusting to this can mean learning to layer up in winter or mastering the art of staying cool in humid summers. The biggest challenge of all? A sense of isolation. Even with a loving partner, you might feel homesick or disconnected from your roots. This is natural and something many expatriates face. The trick is to build a support system, whether through local friends, expat groups, or frequent visits home. Adapting to life in Japan is undeniably challenging, but it's also deeply enriching. Every hurdle you overcome makes the experience more rewarding. With an open mind and a willingness to learn, you can turn cultural differences into lifelong memories. So after exploring all these topics, one thing is clear. Marrying a Japanese woman or anyone from a different culture isn't just about love. It's about navigating a world of differences, from cultural norms and family expectations to communication styles and lifestyle changes. But is it worth it? Absolutely, if you're prepared for the adventure. Marriage itself is a journey, but intercultural marriage, that's a whole other level. It challenges you to rethink your assumptions, adapt your habits, and grow as a person. Sure, there are hurdles, but there are also opportunities to build something truly unique, a partnership that blends the best of both worlds. Think about it this way. Every challenge we discussed, from communication gaps to societal pressures, is a chance to learn. Instead of seeing these as roadblocks, view them as stepping stones to a stronger, more resilient relationship. After all, growth happens outside your comfort zone, right? And let's not forget the beauty of it all. You're not just marrying a person, you're gaining access to an incredible culture. From the serene rituals of a Japanese tea ceremony to the vibrant energy of a summer festival, life with a Japanese partner offers experiences you wouldn't find anywhere else. Does that mean it's easy? Of course not. Cultural clashes will happen. You'll misstep, feel frustrated, and sometimes question if it's all too much. But here's the thing. Love isn't about avoiding difficulties. It's about facing them together with respect, patience, and a sense of humor. One of the most important tools in your relationship toolkit? Communication. Talk openly with your partner about your feelings, your struggles, and your expectations. The more you understand each other's perspectives, the easier it becomes to bridge the gap between your worlds. If you've been watching this and thinking, this sounds intense, well, it can be, but it's also deeply rewarding. Every compromise, every awkward cultural misunderstanding, and every late-night conversation about your differences brings you closer. And in the end, that's what love is all about. So here's my advice. Don't shy away from the challenges. Embrace them. Be curious about your partner's culture and share your own. Laugh at the awkward moments and celebrate the small victories. That's how you build a life that's rich, meaningful, and uniquely yours. And hey, if you're still not sure whether this path is for you, don't stress. Take your time, explore the culture, and talk to others who've been in similar relationships. Love isn't about rushing, it's about finding the right person and building a life you're both excited to live. Thanks for watching. If you've got stories, experiences, or thoughts about intercultural relationships, drop them in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content exploring Japanese culture and relationships. See you in the next video.